Hello everyone, let's get started. I'm Gary Dowdy with Pervasive Path Consulting. Joining me today for this webinar will be Brian Stein, also with Pervasive. Pervasive is a strategy and technology consulting firm providing mobile solutions. Our experience includes more than 40 enterprise mobile implementations in the last 3 years, from strategy to development to adoption. This webinar, Lesson Learned, How to Avoid Mistakes in a Nascent Mobile Market, is based on that experience. So let's start with the obvious. Mobile is hot, right? Depending on which analyst you subscribe to, smartphone shipments have or will soon exceed personal computer shipments. Mobile internet usage will surpass traditional internet usage in just a few years. And it seems like every day a major retailer or Fortune 500 company announces some type of mobile initiative. And back at home, you're probably asking yourself the questions on these screens and a whole lot more. Why do mobile projects cost so much? Do we have the right people on the project? This is the first time we've done mobile. How can I estimate a timeline, let alone commit to a hard set of dates? Will my mobile solution be able to scale? And will it be reliable? There are so many tools on the market today. Are we using the right ones? What am I not thinking of but should? Is my organization, and especially my IT department, ready for such initiative? Why is this so hard? And of course, it would be great to be as magical as a genie and simply make all these questions go away. Well, we can't help with that, but what we can do is share lessons learned from those 40 enterprise mobile projects. Specifically for this webinar, we're going to cover 6 key items on how to develop a mobile strategy specific to your organization objectives and capabilities, manage expectations regarding features and timelines, understand and plan for integration challenges, select a development approach, whether that be native or platform, and we'll explain these terms later in the session. Define an appropriate testing and deployment plan, and make, or rather put, adoption and user experience higher up on your priority list. For details on the first lesson, I will turn the webinar over to Brian.
Thanks, Gary, and welcome to everyone on the call. Too often, we found that mobile initiatives are based on a mandate from leadership to have an app in the iTunes store by X date, rather than beginning with a comprehensive strategy which reflects the overall objectives and capabilities of the organization. A mobile strategy should accomplish the following goals. It should describe the functionality to be delivered, identify the target devices, whether they're feature phones, smartphones, tablets, or even embedded devices, and finally it should prioritize the target delivery channels from SMS, mobile webs, and native applications. To develop these answers, an effective approach is adhere to the adage, seek first to understand, then be understood. First, you'll want to understand the company strategy and how it relates to online and offline channels. This will help ensure that your mobile strategy supports a holistic customer experience across these channels. Secondly, you should consider who are you developing the mobile solution for. Use customer demographics to inform the decision as to what type of solutions you should build. Consider the technical competency of your users, penetration of device types across those groups, etc. For example, if you're targeting the mass market, an application which runs only on a $500 smartphone may not be the best choice for you. Next, you have to ask yourself, what do you want to achieve with mobile? Is this simply a Me Too offering, where mobile is just a checkbox on your to-do list? Or do you want to accomplish specific goals such as brand extension, customer service, or revenue generation? As with any goal, you'll also need to spend some time asking yourself how you will measure success against these objectives. Fourth, you should identify what unique value or capabilities your organization can provide in order to differentiate your offering. Do you have relevant data that you can present or services you can offer? Without these capabilities, you'll end up with one of the thousands of worthless apps that litter the App Store today versus a truly engaging experience. Only after you've answered the questions above can you begin to define the appropriate use cases for the mobile channel. A critical concept for our clients is the realization that mobile is not an extension of a website. In fact, it's the opposite, and the detailed, granular functionality that makes sense in a desktop application or a website do not necessarily translate to the mobile channel. You should focus on high-value, common transactions and keep them simple. Mobile is about immediacy. In one of our cases, we had to convince a Midwest bank not to incur the cost of providing 2 years' worth of transaction history via the mobile app. The reality is nobody was going to scroll through that detail on the phone, and it can result in a degraded application performance and user experience. Finally, it's important to make sure that mobile initiatives are coordinated across the entire organization. Launching a new mobile product should be done in conjunction with marketing and may also require training for call center agents, tellers, and others. Another example was provided this past September when Barney's marketing department decided to embrace mobile technology and included a QR code on a full-page ad they put in the New York Times. Had they done this in coordination with their IT department, they may have realized that the QR code took customers to a non-mobile optimized site, and they could have avoided the bad user experience, not to mention the resulting negative press that this mistake generated.
Number 2 on our list, how do you manage expectations regarding features and timeline? Marketing wants everything in V1. You can't blame them for a wish list, but it's just that. As with any initiative, and as Brian mentioned on the previous slide, it is imperative to work closely with your stakeholders to prioritize items in order of importance, starting with the separation of the nice-to-haves versus the gotta-haves. Some items are fairly straightforward. For example, you should launch a mobile website before developing a mobile app for the iPhone or any other device. Having a mobile-friendly site first ensures that you've thought through repurposing of your content and the user experience to deliver your message and your value proposition. And with a mobile website, you can glean analytics about your users as to the type of devices and what pages they're viewing on your site. This information should help you create a fact-based method for an application roadmap. Educate your core hosts and end users that mobile is iterative. Just as the platform itself is evolving, so are your content and applications. Most people use the Agile method for this type of incremental improvement, as a feedback loop from end users is a great way to help prioritize the next set of enhancements. Take emotion out of the equation. Do you really need an app in the App Store, or will a mobile web application work just fine? Sure, there's marketing appeal of being in that App Store, but how many apps have you downloaded your phone and maybe used that app just once or twice and then forgot about it? One study showed that 80% of the users did not use an app again after the first time. For those instances where an app is appropriate, well-timed updates can be part of brand awareness and utility for your end users.
Mobile computing is often referred to as ubiquitous or pervasive computing because the technology allows users to interact with systems and data from any device wherever they may be. While middleware, often web services, allows for connectivity between those systems and your mobile solution, don't assume that just because your organization has middleware, the integration will be easy. Often, existing web services have been purpose-built for other applications, and while they may provide a means for getting at and updating the data, they won't necessarily contain the business rules and logic you need. One large bank that we work with had extensive web service library for accessing and manipulating customer accounts, but all the logic for sorting and displaying those accounts resided in their online banking system, as well as the business rules regarding which accounts were able to be transferred to or from. They were faced with the decision of either modifying their middleware, which would require additional changes to their online system, or rewriting the business logic into their mobile offering. Either choice had a significant impact to both development and testing efforts. They ended up choosing to recreate the logic in the mobile channel, which added 1 month to the development and at least 2 months to the testing phase. Another customer we work with utilized a hosted back-end system, which provided web services for replicating data across the organization. However, because these web services were intended for nightly replication and processing and were owned by a third party, we discovered they were offline from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. nightly, a window which we couldn't control. Obviously, the customer couldn't have their mobile solutions unavailable to customers during a peak period. As such, they were forced to start from scratch in developing an alternative integration method. In both of these cases, what was initially scoped as a short, moderately priced project ended up taking much longer and costing significantly more than expected. This had negative implications not only for the organization, as they lost their first mover advantage relative to their peers, but also political impacts for the project sponsors who had committed to their bosses they would have a mobile solution launched by a certain date. Clearly, the cost of underestimating integration can be severe. Even once you've established integration between your mobile infrastructure and your back end, you aren't necessarily done. Most B2C applications assume real-time connectivity between the mobile device and host system, but that can't be relied on, and your end users may need continuous access. In that case, you'll have to design for data replication and synchronization to allow for offline processing. This requires local data storage, which often needs to be encrypted, as well as additional logic on both the client and the server side. If you're facing these types of requirements, I'd urge you to look at some of the existing platforms and product offerings to source these capabilities, which brings us to our next lesson.
Once you understand what you're going to build, you need to determine how you want to build it. That's number 4 of our 6 items to cover today. The first decision on your development approach is native or platform. By native, I'm talking about developing an application specific to a device. For example, Apple has a development kit for creating native applications for the iPod Touch, the iPhone, and iPad. Android, BlackBerry, and Windows have similar kits. A platform is a suite of tools that includes a development environment that provides for a common code base and allows you to deploy on multiple devices. The phrase, write once, deploy everywhere, is fairly synonymous with such software vendors as Kony, Antenna Software, and others. There are pros and cons to each approach. Here are some key considerations. Will your mobile initiative target one or many form factors? In other words, do you control the device of the end user? If so, you may only decide to support one device. So let's say that's a Samsung Galaxy S2 running on Android 2.3 operating system running on the T-Mobile network. That already sounds pretty complicated to me. And if you have control, and if you don't have control over the end user device and those other factors, you need to decide how many devices you want to support now and in the near future. Some companies choose only to deploy on the Apple iPhone and ignore others for the first release. That type of decision depends on your end users. For example, Android has 43% of the smartphone market share in the US. That's as of September, according to Nielsen Mobile. How many versions of your application will you support in any given time across X number of phone types and Y operating systems? For example, Apple just came out with a new version of their operating system, version 5. Obviously, there are plenty of applications out there today that have to support version 4 and version 5. As you can imagine, the impact can be exponential as you look across the different types of phones and operating systems. What type of internal talent do you have available for development and support? Will you use a third-party development shop or a software vendor for the initial and subsequent applications? Whatever your choice, you should budget accordingly for sustaining and support of the application for such things as patches, operating system updates, bugs, etc. And last, what will the cost be for licenses and maintenance, which should absolutely figure into your business case and approach.
Our fifth lesson focuses on testing and deployment. These are important concepts for any software development project, but the diversity of target devices and platforms creates additional challenges for mobile initiatives. First, with testing, you need to test not only the application functionality, but also the end-user interface across multiple devices and platforms. You may recall the early days of web development when we optimized web pages for specific versions of Netscape and Internet Explorer, or for certain screen resolutions. Where standardization of HTML has fortunately reduced that need for the web, mobile continues to become more divergent as tablets and new operating systems emerge. This divergence necessitates additional testing for both websites on the mobile device as well as applications. A number of tools and services exist to help mitigate these challenges, but nonetheless, the effort required should not be underestimated. Simulators allow PC-based testing, which is great for unit and functional testing, but won't necessarily give you a 100% accurate picture of the final rendering, and as such, shouldn't be used exclusively as a testing approach. Alternatively, companies like Device Anywhere provide access to testing on a variety of devices and can give a more realistic and precise representation of the end-user experience. These types of tools will help to accelerate your testing and reduce the need for you to purchase hundreds of phones. That being said, no tool can completely eliminate the need for doing a portion of testing on physical devices in the hands of your team. Although device makers strive for consistency across device types, the use of different screen sizes, trackballs, trackpads, and other user interface changes necessitate testing across multiple devices, even within a given device category. For this reason, we recommend selecting 2 or 3 of the most popular devices on a given platform. For example, an iPhone 3S as well as an iPhone 4, a BlackBerry Bold and a BlackBerry Touch, and so on. This will make sure you get coverage on the majority of your user types. As we talked about during the integration discussion, you have hopefully designed your applications to handle both connected and disconnected states. While you may have chosen not to support offline functionality, it's still necessary to make sure your solution gracefully handles the loss of signal and provides a positive user experience in that case. Don't forget to simulate the loss of data connectivity as part of your test cases. Finally, as you plan for on-device testing and also for application certification by the app stores, you will need to think about external connectivity to your QA environment. Providing internet-facing test environments is a change to most corporate policies and approaches, and as such, often takes time to put into place. Planning ahead for this requirement can help avoid project delays during the final phases of testing and keep your launch on schedule. That brings us to the deployment. Launching a mobile initiative requires coordination of activities, both internal and external to your organization. You'll want to plan ahead to make sure marketing launch activities are timed to coincide or follow the release of your application, and any delays in the project are communicated in a timely manner so that marketing plans can be updated accordingly. Similarly, a launch of a mobile project is likely, at least initially, to generate increased traffic to your customer support center. Whether you have dedicated specialists or general training for your team, it's important that you are prepared to answer your customers' questions about the mobile application and also, to some extent, address questions on how to use these apps across the supported devices. Lastly, as you get into incremental releases of mobile projects, you'll want to plan for multiple test environments to allow sustaining support of the initial release while also testing the new application. And also plan how you will roll back to the prior version of a release if something new goes wrong during a launch.
Last but not least, number 6. The launch of your mobile initiative is not the end game. Far from it. Adoption and the user experience becomes the focus of your efforts post-launch. We did some work with a software company that inserted an adoption framework into the sales and services component of their product lifecycle. It was really quite brilliant. Most people depend on use cases, perhaps some focus groups, a pilot, to help ensure adoption and use of the end product. But adoption done right is much more holistic and helps get everyone on the same page. A big mistake we see companies make is trying to replicate a web application to mobile. As you know, the experience can be vastly different from a web to a phone to a tablet. Understanding the job your user is trying to solve or do is paramount to success. It incorporates sales, operations, marketing, training, support, and information IT from initial planning stages and continues with the evolution of your mobile efforts. You should probably think of it as a continuous improvement process. For example, you will want to coordinate customer communications and the sales force with marketing to be in sync with your launch deliveries and training and support. In traditional internet marketing parlance, you need to synchronize your offline or your physical channels with your virtual ones. That sounds straightforward, but this gets a lot more complicated if your organization has several initiatives, some of which may be run by different groups. And believe me, your end users can spot organization silos. Support process differs if your application is for the enterprise or in-house versus customer-facing. If you're rolling out an employee solution, you might want to have more control of the phone, its security, the ability to wipe the phone if it's lost or stolen, and to push application and updates based on your schedule, not some other vendor. This is called mobile device management, and there are some neat tools on the market that can greatly improve this support and maintenance process. And finally, analytics and the art of tying it back to campaigns. Early on in the project, you define success criteria and how to measure it. For your launch and all subsequent activities, measuring the cause and effect is key for iterative improvement. If you have all these components in place, you are well on your way, as this is definitely a journey, not a destination. And on a final note, before we open the session to Q&A, Pervasive has built all these lessons into our methodology. But whether you use our approach or some other process, it's important to incorporate a flow of activities with stage gates or decision points to ensure your project stays on track. That concludes our formal presentation. A copy of this webinar will be available on the Pervasive website shortly. I will now turn the lead over to Brian for any questions.
At this time, we'll open the conference bridge for questions. To ask a question, please raise your hand in the webinar control panel. I'll call on you and unmute your phone. If you're having any difficulties finding this feature, just type a short note in the chat box or the question box, and we'll introduce you to ask a question. We do have a couple questions that we've received online, so we're going to start by taking those. And Gary, I'll turn it over to you to facilitate that part.
Okay, here's the first question. We've been developing apps for specific applications, and they have multiple apps in the App Store. Is this a best practice?
assuming we're talking about developing different applications by functionality, our best practice and recommendation is to consolidate these under a single application that uses a menu up front to differentiate the functionality. This allows you a single brand on the user's device and a single touch point with the customer. You can use users and role types if necessary to segment the functionality if you don't want to make it available to everybody.
So that lets you have one branded app in the App Store, but multiple applications that stem from it.
Precisely.
Okay. Okay, here's another online question. I'm hearing a lot about HTML5. Will I need to develop device-specific applications, or can I just use HTML5?
HTML5 shows a lot of potential and certainly opens up a lot of cross-platform development opportunities. However, HTML5 is not necessarily ubiquitous today in that you can rely on it solely as a solution, nor will it provide the access to some of the lower-level device features such as the camera, GPS, etc., that allow you the complete control and interaction with your users. So for the time being, there will still be plenty of cases where on-device application makes sense versus HTML5.
Yeah, and I would add, you've seen some platform providers that provide an application framework to have an app on the device itself and then allow for HTML5 to control application development within that container, if you will.
Yeah, I think for B2E experiences, that makes a lot of sense. But with the B2C and where you want to control the branded end user experience, you'll still want to have a native application. All right, that appears to be all the questions we have. Anyone else at this point? All right. Well, then I thank you for attending our webinar. As Gary mentioned before the QA, a replay will be available on our website later today. If you have any questions for us, please email info@pervasivepath.com or visit our website. Thanks, and have a great day.